Welcome to this episode of the story. Have you subscribed yet? Chapter 114, Preparing Defenses and Advancing Cultivation. The morning mist over Linksea town had not yet fully dispersed when the sound of rammed earth began to echo through the streets and alleys. The townsfolk, shaking off the Ningzhou of the previous night, turned their worries into tangible action. In the open space in front of the council hall, more than 30 young and strong men were busy around a pile of stone blocks as tall as a man. They worked with their upper bodies bare, sweat dripping from their bronze-colored skin, and every lift was accompanied by a Zhenqi chant. Put in a little more effort. This last piece has to be fitted into the gap in the southeast corner. The third elder, who was in charge of supervision, held a rattan cane but couldn't bring himself to strike. He looked at the newly built battlements on top of the town wall. Each stone there was infused with 3 layers of spiritual power. The outer layer was the petrification power condensed by earth element cultivators. The middle layer was mixed with tough vines tuitioned by wood, element spiritual power, and the innermost layer was the time crystals reinforced by the Su family's children with reverse time spiritual power. An ordinary sword or knife striking it would only leave a white mark. Beneath the town wall, 5 elders with white hair and beards were gathered around a spread-out animal skin map, arguing in low voices. The outline of Linksea town was drawn with cinnabar on the map, and 36 red dots were evenly distributed along the town wall, which were the core nodes of the defense formation. The purity of the spirit crystals in the southwest corner is insufficient. The oldest formation master pointed to one of the red dots with his dry finger. We must use cold moon crystals of tier 3 or higher. Otherwise, they won't be able to block the spiritual power impact of mid-level cultivators. The middle-aged cultivator beside him looked troubled. There are only 3 cold moon crystals left in the warehouse. They were originally kept for the children to use when they break through. Now is the most critical breakthrough moment. The elder with the dry finger slapped the map hard. Go, melt that ice-patterned cauldron in my alchemy room. The moonstones inlaid on the cauldron are enough to support 3 nodes. When the news reached the alchemy room in the west of the town, the apprentice guarding the stove was holding that ice-patterned cauldron, which had been passed down for 3 generations, and shedding tears. The cloud patterns carved on the cauldron had been polished bright by the years, but now it was going to be smashed and melted into auxiliary materials for the formation. However, when he saw the townsfolk carrying stone blocks through the morning mist, he finally gritted his teeth and pushed the cauldron into the furnace. When the flames rose, it was hard to tell whether the light on his face was from the fire or his tears. At the same time, in a hidden cave in the back mountain of Linksea town, Sumu was in a strange state of meditation. The night pearls inlaid on the cave walls emitted a faint blue light, making his cross-legged figure look like a jade carving. In front of him, the ancient secret manual brought back from the temple was floating. The yellowed animal skin pages were trembling slightly at a speed imperceptible to the naked eye, as if breathing in the spiritual power in the cave with a life of their own. Su Mu's consciousness had long since sunk deep into the sea of consciousness. It was not pitch black there, but filled with countless flowing silver threads, which were the materialized power of time. He tried to reach out with his consciousness, wanting to straighten out some disordered silver threads, but a stinging pain like being pricked by a needle came from his fingertips. This power of time was more unruly than what he had encountered in the temple. Every touch felt like confronting the rules of the entire time and space. Concentrate. Keep focused. Sumu silently recited the opening mantra of the secret manual in his heart. He remembered the reliefs on the stone walls of the temple. Those cultivators draped in stars always sat in a cross-legged posture, with their hands forming the reversing heaven and earth seal. So he formed the seal in the same way, and the reverse, time spiritual power in his dantian immediately surged towards his fingertips like a tide. When the spiritual power condensed into a silver gray light ball in his palm, the air in the cave suddenly began to twist. The water droplets dripping from the cave roof hung in the air, refracting colorful halos. The dead leaves on the ground curled upward at an extremely slow speed, as if time was flowing backward. Sumu could clearly feel that his breathing had slowed down, but the sound of blood flowing became clearer. Every heartbeat was like tapping the drumbeat of time. He tried to push the light ball forward, and the suspended water droplets suddenly burst into countless tiny water particles, each frozen in a different trajectory. This was an advanced application of reverse, time spiritual power, frame separation, which could break down an instant action into countless fragments. In actual combat, it was enough to see through the flaws of any move. However, this move consumed a lot of spiritual power. Sumo only maintained it for 3 breaths, and fine sweat oozed from his forehead. After taking a break, he began to try to compress the spiritual power. The secret manual said that when reverse, time spiritual power was condensed to the extreme, it could form a time blade at the fingertips, which would have the effect of time stagnation when slashed out. Sumo continuously compressed the spiritual power in his denshin. The originally cloud, like silver, gray, gradually condensed into a liquid state, making a low dragon-like roar as it flowed in the meridians. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his chest, as if an invisible knife was tearing his internal organs. Not good. Sumo quickly withdrew his spiritual power, and a trace of blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. He realized that he had been too eager for success and ignored the bearing limit of his meridians. The compressed spiritual power had begun to counterattack. If not shoot out in time, it would at least cause serious injuries, or at worst, lead to deviation from the right path in cultivation. In a critical moment, he remembered the backflow technique taught by the town mayor and immediately guided the runaway spiritual power to flow in a circular way in the meridians. This process was like taming a wild horse on a narrow mountain path. Every turn was accompanied by piercing pain, but Sumo gritted his teeth. The image of the townsfolk reinforcing the city wall flashed in his mind. If they could build a tall stone wall block by block, why couldn't he tame his power bit by bit? He didn't know how long it had passed. When the first ray of sunlight shone on Sumo's face through the gap in the cave, he finally drew the last trace of restless spiritual power into his denshin. At this moment, the light ball in his palm had shrunk to the size of a pigeon's egg, but it exuded a terrifying pressure. He tried to swing his palm, and a 3-inch deep crack immediately appeared on the cave wall. The rocks at the edge of the crack showed a glass, like luster, which was the trace of erosion by the power of time. Sumo stood up and stretched his muscles and bones, feeling that his whole body was full of explosive power. He walked out of the cave and saw that Lingxi town at the foot of the mountain had taken on a new look. The defense formation on the top of the town wall was in trial operation, and the pale golden light shield was like an inverted bowl covering the entire town. The townsfolk were practicing with bows, arrows, and spears. Although the formation was not neat, the sound of shouting and killing scared the birds in the forest to fly away. He knew that the real test was still ahead. But when he saw the golden light shield and heard the Zhentian shouts of the townsfolk, the unease in his heart gradually dissipated. He clenched his fists, and the reverse, time spiritual power flowed at his fingertips, reflecting the firm light in his eyes. No matter what kind of enemy came, Lingxi town was ready, and he would be the sharpest sword to protect this land. When the sun set in the west, Sumo walked down the back mountain. Beside the old locust tree at the town entrance, several children were arranging stones in the pattern of a defense formation, while their fathers were polishing weapons not far away. Seeing Sumo coming, a little girl with pigtails held up her wooden sword and said, "Brother Sumo, I also want to learn your skills to protect the town." Sumo smiled and ruffled her hair, then looked at the fading twilight. In the distant sky, a dark cloud was gathering quietly, but the lights of Lingxi town were lit one by one, forming a warm sea of light in the night. The story continues. More exciting content is coming up. Subscribe as soon as possible.